What's up, y'all? This is Matthew from the Rim Review. The Rim Review is a page that offers in-depth player analysis and gives nuance to the way that you watch basketball. In this series, we're going to be going over every single prospect in the upcoming 2026 NBA Draft. And in today's episode, we're going to be looking at the 22-year-old out of St. John's, Zuby Ejiofor. Getting straight into Zuby Ejiofor's offensive strengths, there are a few things to note. Firstly, he's a pretty solid post player. He consistently has a low center of gravity for being a smaller center, and he's able to win these strength battles against taller forwards. And he was in the 76th percentile in post points per possession, and that can be seen through his game. Secondly, I think he's a pretty solid facilitator and passer for size, and it resulted in him being fourth in assists amongst big men in the entire country. Lastly, I think he's a really good offensive rebounder. He was 15th in D1 with 123 offensive rebounds. So he's really, grimy in the paint. And that's shown through his entire game. When talking about weaknesses, there are a ton, which is my slight concern with Zuby. Firstly, he's going to be an undersized 5-man. He was 6'9" and primarily played the 5, and so that undersized, was going to impact his draft stock. He's also an inconsistent shooter with a slow jump shot. He shot 31% beyond the arc, and with, I believe, 60 attempts, which is decent volume. So he's not really able to stretch the floor whatsoever. And at St. John's, he wasn't used in pick and roll that much, with being in this 22nd percentile in pick and roll frequency. And lastly, similar to a lot of big men, they're used more in isolation, especially in college, and he's pretty hit or miss and doesn't have great handles. And he was in the 47th percentile in isolation points per possession. So in these first couple examples, like a lot of these offensive analysis, I want to talk about Zuby Ejiofor in transition. So this first example we see off of a turnover, Zuby Ejiofor simply catches it in the paint with a very quick spin, and it's just great instincts. I think this is something that I did not include in his offensive strengths, but he just has great awareness, especially in the post. So we see right here, the Xavier defender overcommits, and just Zuby Ejiofor loves this quick spin, uses it consistently. It's just a great decision by Zuby. In this next example, another transition example, and this is almost exactly like one of our first clips in my Jaden Quaintance player analysis, where Zuby simply is ahead of the play, and they're going to have to force a switch where Butler is going to be mismatched on Zuby, and Zuby simply has some patient pump fakes, draws contact. It's not a foul. However, I love that the ball's high. He's able to seal the Butler defender. And then lastly, for this last transition example, Zuby's got elite speed, but unfortunately in this example, that great speed, he's just off balance when finishing, and it's a bad miss. But I still think it's just great. He's in the mess. In the offensive rebounds, gets a hand on it, but simply he outruns these 3 Baylor players, and as a result, he rim runs, but unfortunately he does not finish well, and so it's kind of something he's going to need to work on, but I think it's great that he's got that elite speed for a 6'9" big man. Outside of my first concern for Zuby being an undersized center, my second primary concern is the fact that he can't really stretch the floor. So in this example against Providence, Providence defender simply gives him a dare shot, and I just don't think he's going to consistently be able to hit these shots, especially in the NBA when it's a few feet back. However, I don't think you have to completely count him out. In this example, it's going to be a pick and roll situation, an empty side pick and roll, and Zuby has that awareness to pop. But I think it's a beautiful play, especially on both sides with Duke and St. John's. So two teams in the Sweet 16, and we get Zuby setting a screen on Caden Boozer. Elite screen. He realizes that Malik Brown is going to be impacting the pick and roll, blitzing them heavily. One, I think that's elite, coverage by Malik Brown, but the awareness that it's going to be an empty side, which means there's going to be no help right here. Zuby simply is able to pop back, and Duke, I guess, is fine with this, which, to be honest, I don't hate it either. So Cam is not going to rotate, but Zuby simply decides to pop back for a three, and he's able to hit this, not consistently, but something to, not give him every single, free three-pointer. Now let's talk about pick and roll, something that he wasn't used a ton at St. John's, but simply this is just a beautiful possession by St. John's, and I think this is just Rick Pitino's great offense, and I think there are a few things to point out, not even just with Zuby, but just the beauty in Rick Pitino's offense. So we see right here, they used a lot of cutters, and so we see right here they were gonna flow into some dribble handoff action, but Isaiah Sellers decides to cut through, getting the ball to Ian Jackson, and simply, as we see, Ian Jackson gets the dribble handoff. Zuby Ejiofor sets a good screen, and Bryce Hopkins in the corner raises up, resulting in his defender not being able to tag the Zuby Ejiofor who is diving to the rim. And as a result, this is just beautiful basketball. Not really, something crazy with Zuby and pick and roll, but something I really wanted to point out because it's a really great teaching point watching basketball at a higher level. Now going into the post moves of Zuby, as I've said, he's got an elite spin, but this clip is really, really interesting because it just shows how he's able to read his defenders in the post so well. So we see right here that he's kind of, the Providence defender has his feet really allowing him to go down baseline. But unfortunately, the Providence defender, number 17, doesn't realize that there's really no help at the other block. And so Zuby simply is able to have a beautiful spin. There's nothing really stopping Zuby with that spin, especially when they're basically giving him a baseline spin and drive. Now, my slight concern, as I've talked about, him being 6'9", is that he's not a freak 6'9" athlete. I think he's got a really, really good low base, but unfortunately, when you're going to be guarding or getting guarded by some NBA talent, when you've got a picture like this with this Butler defender, he's just playing Zuby perfectly. He's got a very long stance. He's able to stay low, and so although Zuby is really, really good, not great touch on this possession. We can see back of the rim, but this is just great defense by the Butler player. And my small concern is that I don't know, Zuby's not the most elite post player. He's really good, but not the most elite. And so the fact that it might not fully translate against more, elite and better defenders in the post, just a small concern. Against Providence, Zuby again has that spin move, which is beautiful, but he's just really, really physical and patient. So it's a great rip right there, and it's able to, get the get into the chest of the Providence defender. Very, very patient. It's very, very beautiful. And so Zuby really is, I don't want to say he's a one-dimensional player, because he is able to get, other ways. He's able to contribute in other ways. In this example, I think he's a really good passer. And so with Zuby, he's not going to be the most elite 6'9" post player, maybe like a Dembona. Alex did an incredible player analysis 2 years ago with the Dembona, with him being a post player and a post-centric player that is not, hurt by him being undersized. And so he's not going to be like a Dembona, but he's still pretty solid. Right here, we see that Zuby's going to be fighting. Something that I love about him is that he has this elite seal against number 11 on Georgetown. Fighting. He's not scared to get into the mud, get and draw some contact, gets fouled, goes to the free throw line with 7 minutes left in that game. It's really, really beautiful, and I don't think Zuby's the most elite offensive prospect. There's plenty of better bigs, but for his size and what he brings to the table, he does it pretty well. In this example, he's going against Flory Badunga, and we sees that there's going to be a double coming in. And so, again, he loves that spin, and I think Kansas does a great job where they realize that they're going to try to double before that spin. But Zuby, again, has that great instincts that before he's going to go for what we call it a hit when someone decides to spin. Kansas tries to get a hit, but Zuby picks it up. Great touch with the right hook, finish. And then a couple more examples with Zuby in the post. I think he does a really good job with a jump stop. And this is something for anyone watching that's a big man, no matter what level you play at. This is some beautiful notes to take and write down. And so when you're watching Zuby right here, one, great entry pass. First off, great photo. You see that Zuby has his hand up and is ready to back down the Providence defender. But what I really, really love is that it's one strong pound dribble right here, but then the fact that he's able to get a bunch of ground. He's able to, acquire that territory in the center of the post right here. Great jump stop, and then quickly gets it up with the right hook. He's going to be an undersized big, and he knows that. But the fact that he's able to get that quick jump stop, gain a bunch of area, and get a quick right hook is beautiful. This is going to be our last post example, and again, my concern with the fact that Zuby really can't stretch the floor that well. He took not a bunch, but he took about 28 non-paint twos, and he's just not crazy consistent. He shot 45% on obviously low volume, but I just don't love this mid-range high post shot. It's not a bad miss, that's the back iron, but not something that I'm in love with. However, we're going to go into something that I am in love with, and it's that Zuby's an elite offensive rebounder, especially for his size. I think he's consistently in the mix, and he's trying to win the fight. I think with right here, this is just a great picture that he wants to fight. And the fact that he's consistently winning this fight, as we see right here, gets a great putback. It's just a great story. This is going to be another example right here where he just wins the fight over the Alabama mess in the paint, gets an offensive rebound, continues the possession, and it's just quite beautiful. Right step through right there. He's patient. Just his consistent ability to win the battle is just amazing. Going into a couple more examples, another strength, as I've talked about, is his playmaking. As he sees, could be almost a post example where he's in the post. Creighton decides to double, and although this is a pass in the air, it's not going to be a perfect pass. His awareness sees the double, kick it away. It's the little things. Again, this is going to be another example where he just does the little things, where Zuby Ejiofor gets a flat. They play some flash game and they're going to follow, and there's just a little butt screen, and so it's something very, very small. You might not notice it when you're watching the game, but the fact that he does the little things with this catch into the butt screen, it just slows the Butler defender a tiny bit, where the rest of his teammates, I believe in that example was Dylan Mitchell, was just able to get downhill. Beautiful. Talking about isolation though, this is just a small concern, similar to when we were watching Jaden Quaintance, was that he just has some bad handles. And so I don't really think that Zuby's going to be running the floor for any NBA team. But the bad handles, they're kind of, going to need to get a little bit better. And, Zuby's not, an isolation player, but there are, again, some flashes. Worst case scenario, late shot clock, as I've talked about with Jaden Quaintance, is that he has some good reads. And so in this example, 27 on Iowa State decides to go under, and I wanted you just to watch this example where Ejiofor sees that he's going to go under, and he immediately reacts and is able to get downhill. And the fact that 27 is going under, it's causing some, confliction with the Iowa State defender that's truly guarding Zuby. And so Zuby gets downhill and is able to simply beat his man. And so it's just, again, the little things that Zuby does, he does so well, and that can be shown through his experience playing, college basketball for 4 years. But not every single example is going to be beautiful. In this example, he's off 2, and I don't really love, even though it's 20 seconds into the shot clock, and this might be one of the last times you're able to get a shot up. I don't love the get your head down, go off balance, bad 2. I don't love that. This example right here is going to be guarded by Dame Sarr. So this isn't even, a big man. If some teams in the NBA decide to switch, it's going to be slight, it's not going to be perfect. And so Dame is, a more physical player. And so Zuby kind of gets bailed out with a foul here. But my slight concern is that Zuby, isn't able to, accelerate against, smaller, less physical guys compared to him. And then I think this is the last example with Zuby. And again, my concern, the fact that he can't stretch the floor, is that some teams might play Zuby like this, how Alabama did, where they simply do not believe that Zuby can score whatsoever. The fact that Zuby's man is in the paint and just basically allowing him to get downhill, it's just obviously that big concern that if you can't stretch the floor, why would you ever decide to guard him, tightly, when you can simply have a tall defender in the paint, and help? Or simply, in this example, Zuby tries to get downhill, he gets stuffed by this bigger Alabama defender, and unfortunately gets a bad, miss. Now let's get into what I'm most excited for, and that is Zuby Ejiofor's defense. Going into Zuby Ejiofor's defensive strengths, I think the thing that really stands out is the fact that he can switch 1 through 5, and that he consistently attacks the switch, which I'll go over in the film. He was in the 88th percentile in pick and roll defense, and it's just beautiful watching him play. Again, he's got elite length, and he's consistently vertical, and so he's got that 7'1" wingspan, and he had a total of 79 blocks, which was 11th in D1. He's got ridiculous strength in the post, so again, offensively pretty similar defensively, where he's got elite strength, and he was in the 83rd percentile in post defense, which plays a ton and shows that even though he's a little bit smaller, he's able to defend pretty much everywhere. And a small thing, he was taught well. He's got great situational awareness, and just shout out to Rick Pitino for developing Zuby into such a great defender. And then just a few, weaknesses, and it's nothing crazy. Again, there's some times where he can get beat by shiftier guards, but I think pretty much, if you're guarding Darren Peterson, pretty much anyone might get beat. And then he's a little too short to guard elite post players, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The first thing I want to talk about Zuby Ejiofor's game is going to be his switchability, especially in pick and roll situations. And so in this example, we see that Silas Demery and Terrace Reed go through some dribble handoff action. And so even though they weren't going to fully switch, later on they do. But I think the beautiful part about this example, and we'll see right here, is Zuby Ejiofor's effort at the end of the play. And so as St. John's gets a paint, or UConn gets a paint touch, and St. John's has collapsed, as we see that it's 3 defenders in the paint. There's going to be a full rotate, and so Dylan Mitchell decides to help, resulting in Dylan Darling needing to guard Alex Caravan, and so Osiah Sellers is going to need to do a full rotate, resulting in one of these guys in the mix in the paint to pick up Osiah Sellers' man. But I think the beautiful part about this, and just Zuby Ejiofor's awareness, is the fact that he sees this, and we can see that Osiah Sellers' man is drifting away, and so Zuby consistently has that effort and awareness to get a late contest, but just that consistent effort, and he does this consistently. And this next example showing his effort is that Zuby Ejiofor attacks the switch. And so even though the end of this possession isn't great, he's got, an undisciplined closeout the beautiful part about this is that he attacks the switch. A lot of teams, when they're switching 1 through 3 or 1 through 5 maybe for St. John's, they do it lackadaisically where they point. But in this example, Zuby Ejiofor is going to attack the closeout, attack the switch, and it's beautiful. This next example in pick and roll defense is just Zuby Ejiofor's ability to stay in front. So guarding Ole Miss, not a little awkward pick and roll, but he's able to stay in front against a shiftier guard, but he's got that elite length, as we've talked about. Get a tip on the ball, force a block, great length. Again, he's consistently able to be body between, and so again, he's going to be guarded, a smaller player. But the fact that Zuby has that, chest, able to wall up, is elite. But the fact that I think when you have such an elite defender and with Zuby, and you can switch 1 through 4, 1 through 5, the rest of the team is able to buy into this defensive mindset. And so we see right here, Ian Jackson is at the elbow, and he again simply is able to quickly swipe at the ball, get back to his man. And so even though Zuby is slightly beat at the beginning, Zuby's able to get back, body between, because of the help of Ian Jackson in the gaps. Right here, unfortunately, as we've talked about, sometimes he can get beat by smaller players. I believe that's Aiden Holloway. And so they go through some ghost action, as we've talked about, when you don't set the screen. And so Zuby does get beat here, and he has a bad foul, and one. I think that's something that I didn't talk about in his weaknesses, but frequently Zuby just has some, awkward bad fouls at the end of plays. In this final pick and roll example, I think I want to continue to re-emphasize Zuby Ejiofor's elite length. And so he slightly gets beat on this switch, but it's not too bad. And I think it's beautiful. Again, his awareness, but also, Rick Pitino as a coach. So even though he slightly gets beat, this is a really, really, really hard angle to score on. And so the fact that Zuby has that elite length, is able to, get a tip, a block on it, even though he gets beat, is beautiful. Again, Zuby Ejiofor is able to, switch, not even through pick and roll, but, dribble handoff in this example. And again, with his elite length, he's able to force a tip, get a block, and it's something, again, he consistently does over and over again. It's beautiful from Zuby. Now transitioning into post defense, he's physical, and so against Ole Miss, Zuby is low, and as I've talked about with Quayton, something that he doesn't do consistently, but Zuby does, as an undersized center, he's figuratively, sitting in that chair and has a low base, and he's consistently physical, gets his elbow into the Ole Miss offensive player and forces a terrible shot. Absolutely beautiful, but he does this so consistently. It was, when watching Zuby defensively, it was hard to get bad clips, and this is going to be another beautiful clip where Zuby, even though he's going to be a little bit smaller, he just simply has that strength. He has his feet planted and just simply looks like he's just the alpha male. Great defender, again, vertical, hands up, something he consistently does. He does the little things, but again, with as we've talked about, offensively, sometimes he's not able to outbeat great defenders. The same thing is going to happen against Terrace Reed, where Terrace Reed, incredible post player, and so unfortunately Zuby just absolutely gets bullied, and so it's something to point out. And then post defense wise, against Jane Quaintz, who we already made a video on, beautifully, even though I believe Quaintance has an inch or two on Zuby. Beautiful example of Zuby simply having a tough catch and forcing a turnover, continuing to show that physicality that he offers. Now transitioning into on ball, Zuby's guarding Darren Peterson, basically a consensus top 5 pick in the NBA draft. And so the fact that sometimes against NBA level talent, he's going to get beat and get some bad fouls, which I've talked about. However, it's not every time, and I think it's something he can work on. And so looking at other examples of on ball, he's just consistently able to have a body between. And so even though at the beginning of this example, he does fall for a fake, he's able to pop back, get that body between, wall up, great contest, something that I love, and that the fact that Zuby is such an elite defender. Again, it's just the fact that Zuby has that verticality. Averaged, I think, maybe a little bit over 2 blocks a game, I believe, around that area. But the fact that he consistently is just able to have his chest in between the ball and the basket. Don't let any player get an easy basket. It's some great stuff. Right here, I think that Zuby has some great late clock instincts. So we see that it's going to be late shot clock, 10 seconds left. Zuby and Bryce Hopkins decide to switch, and then Zuby goes under, knowing that there's only about 4 seconds left, and knowing that he has that awareness where he knows there's only 4 seconds left. It's going to be a pull up by the DePaul player, and Zuby with that elite length, no one's going to be able to score on him, late shot clock when, Zuby is in front of the man. He's also able to, apply pressure in this example. Quick stabs at the ball is beautiful, especially with that long wingspan. And it's something that he consistently does where, although he might not get a ton of steals, it's more through the blocks, which, again, this into the play results in a block. Those quick stabs are quite beautiful. Going, off the ball, and there's not going to be a ton of examples, but the fact that he's up the floor and then is able to recover and has that great length is just beautiful. Transitioning into help defense, again, his verticality. If you aren't aware, we can see right here that Zuby Ejiofor is the low man. And so with the low man, one of your main priorities is that if the guy guarding the ball, in this example, Ian Jackson, gets beat by, I believe that's Cameron Carr, Zuby Ejiofor simply stays vertical, and this is going to be a great picture where all you need to do is just have your hands straight up, and it's impossible to score on a guy like Zuby. Again, this is going to be another example about elite verticality, where Zuby just excels tremendously. And so even though he is not the guy guarding the pick and roll, unfortunately there's some bad communication between the St. John's defenders. I believe that was Ian Jackson and Bryce Hopkins. But the fact that Zuby Ejiofor is guarding Terrace Reed, but sees that there's some bad communication, he's able to one-on-one stay vertical, get a block against Silas Demary. It's just great stuff. And then lastly, closeouts. Unfortunately, there's some bad communication in this example. Bad closeout. That should be a make against NBA talent, but a lot of these guys, you just need to be disciplined on the ball. Zuby needs to know you've got that elite length that you don't need to jump for those blocks. When talking about Zuby Ejiofor and my entire thoughts, I think it's really a tale of two sides. When I was watching, I knew of Zuby and how he played, but offensively, I was really, really disappointed. I knew that, he averaged a ton of points and was a main, contributor to Rick Pitino's offense. But for someone that was, a post-centric, undersized 5, he's a little inconsistent. If you're curious about, Zuby and talking about undersized 5s, I highly suggest watching Alex's analysis on Adem Bona 2 years ago, because it's perfect. Because when you look at a guy like Adem Bona, he was drafted in the 2nd round, and he just does everything offensively well in the post, and he does it perfectly. Unfortunately, with Zuby, it's not the same thing. He's really unable to stretch the floor, but the main thing is that he just has not perfected, his post craft. And so I don't know if he's going to be, that post. The fact that he hasn't perfected that and is simply unable to stretch the floor is a concern. However, defensively, I was incredibly impressed. I think he's one of the most talented defenders that I've watched. I think might be one of the best defenders in this entire class. And I think it's just the fact that when you draft a guy like Zuby that's so talented defensively, the whole team is going to play better. You're able to switch 1 through 5. We had that example with Ian Jackson in the gaps. They're simply able to, quickly stab at the ball. When you've got a guy like Zuby, it's just hard to play defense badly when he's on the floor. You've got that elite rim protector, as we talked about, his elite verticality, and I think you just need, if I'm, an NBA GM and considering whether or not to draft Zuby Ejiofor, you need to realize that it's really, really, really hard to get, an elite defender, and it's hard. They don't really come by that often, and so I think Zuby being a little bit older, he can make an instant impact, and I think him being, he could very well be an early second-round pick. I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching another episode of the Rim Review. If you have any further suggestions of players you want me to watch, please let me know down below. And until next time, thank you all so much.